There we go. You guys can hear me probably better now. All right, it is 7 o'clock on Monday, and so we are going to start our aerospace education live. All right, this is our first time doing this. Give me a little bit of if you guys can have any problems hearing anything, or if you guys have problems seeing anything, if frames are dropping out, do me a favor, go ahead and just post that in the comment section below. I've got a screen off to the side over here where I'll be able to see your comments. If you have any questions tonight, feel free to go ahead and post those as well. If you're watching this after the live stream is ended, you're watching the recording of it, go ahead and leave the comments down below. We're planning on doing these lessons every Monday at 7 o'clock until we get our CAP squadrons back into the office. Hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. But until then, I wanted to make sure you guys all had AE content. So what we're going to do is we are going to, let me put the PowerPoint here. All right, so we have, the lesson for tonight we're going to talk about is next generation internet. But before we get to that, what we're going to do is we're going to do two things. We're going to do some housekeeping, and then we're also going to do some news, like what's in the news, what happened this week. Nothing to do with any politics, no virus, just all aerospace. That's all we're going to do. So for housekeeping, I've got a couple things for you all. One, if you're in the Greenville Composite Squadron, Wednesday between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m., my wife and I will be at the squadron, and we are going to be handing out the rocket kits, your level 2 rocket kits. If you didn't do the Fizzy Flyer thing for level 1, I'm going to be a little bit more lenient than I was planning on. Go ahead. Let's plan on still doing level 2 with you. We will come back around. We'll do level 1 with you at a later time. When we go to launch the rockets for level 2, we'll also take care of the level 1 at the same time. So if you are in Greenville, go ahead, come on down. And 7 o'clock p.m. At the Greenville headquarters. Okay, so that is the rocket supplies. And then we're actually going to build the rockets next Monday. Next Monday, we're going to talk about rocketry, and we're actually going to, the hands-on is actually going to be to build the rockets. So if you're not a member of the Greenville Composite Squadron, whether you're in Rochester, New York, or you're in, Dallas, Texas, if you would like to take part, go ahead. Go out and try to get yourself a level 1 East rocket, or possibly if you're a little bit older, or if you've got some good hands-on skills, go ahead and get a level 2 if you want. But level 1 will be fine. When you pick up the rockets at Greenville, that's what we're going to be getting. You'll be getting a level 1. The other two things I've got is I would like you to subscribe if you want to get notifications of when these videos are coming out. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and if you want to hit the bell, and then that'll let you know when we're putting up new content. It'll also let you know when we've scheduled a live stream to be going. All right, so lastly, if you would like, go ahead and leave a comment in the description down below if you want to see anything in particular, any lessons in particular. I'm thinking that we're probably going to be here for a little while, so give me some ideas of what you'd like to learn about, and we'll put something together for you. All right, and all right. So with that, let me go to the next slide here. All right. So what do we have in the news? All right. So in the news today, this week, we had a couple of interesting things. Number one, NASA was fixing the Mars lander. It had to hit itself with a shovel. So if you look at, if you were on Earth and you had something get stuck into the ground, what would you do, right? You'd wiggle it, right, and you'd try to rip it out. There's nobody there on Mars to wiggle it and rip it out. The Martian soil was a little bit, at least where they were, the Martian soil was a little bit more compact than they were expecting. So the lander probe got stuck, and they just whacked it. So, billions of dollars in technology, and sometimes you just got to hit it, just like you would in real life. Now, they had to be careful, because if you look at the picture here, there's actually a data ribbon cable coming out the top of the probe. And so if you didn't if they hit that thing wrong, they could have possibly broke that probe. So they had to be really careful with how they hit the thing. They can't just whack it willy-nilly. So that was one thing that was interesting, and they did end up freeing it. That was kind of a last desperation move to hit it, and they did end up freeing the probe by hitting it. So that was good. Our next news story is that for Pratt & Whitney, some folks overseas, they went ahead and they 3D printed a fuel system component for their engine. And it was actually printed out of metal, and it was replacing one of their existing castings. So a part that required forging and casting, they 3D printed. And that is the first time that we really know of that they an aerospace company used a 3D part in an actual engine like that, like Pratt & Whitney did. So that was kind of a neat little story. And then that shows in the future, like if you're going to Mars, right, you can't build everything on Mars. You have to, you can't take everything with you. You can't build everything on Earth and then send everything to Mars. There's going to be things that are going to break. Everything breaks. So it's just a matter of when, not a matter of if. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have the ability to make things in Mars or on a space station. And so being able to 3D print is really important. That's going to be a big step for how we're going to be able to make parts to print. If you're into Star Trek, right, the replicators. So this is our first draft, basically, of a replicator. So that was pretty neat. Let's see here. Our next story is our last story as well. We just had on March 19th, we had our spring equinox, the vernal equinox. And so what that means is the sun, the Earth will go like this when the sun's like this. And that's why, if it's pointed like this, and if you live here, you get more sun on you. So that's the summer for us. But if you were down here in the south, that would be the sun would be away from you. The light would be scattered across a more of a distance and more surface area, and so it would be colder. So what the equinox is when when the sun is exactly halfway. It's at the equator. And so we went from the sun being below us, so we were in our winter, and then now the sun or the Earth is tilted, and by the tilting of the Earth, the tilting has now gone this way. So now we have an equal amount of daylight as we do night, and now we'll slowly start moving this way, and we'll start getting warmer and warmer. So that happened for us on March 19th. So that's why the days are getting longer and longer. Let's see here. So that is it for our news stories. All right. So now we have our lesson. All right. So our lesson today is going to be on the next generation for the internet. And so the reason I wanted to give this lesson today was lots of people are starting to work from home if they have jobs where they can work from home. And we're seeing a really big hit on the internet. Kids are home from school. Most of you are likely home from school if you're watching this live. And so the internet is really taking a big hit. So a lot of people are watching YouTube videos. Hopefully, people like you are watching this channel here. And so all of that data has to go across something in order to get to you. And so I wanted to explain a little bit of the history of data communications. We're going to do that relatively quickly, and then we're going to talk about where we're going. It's super exciting. Technology doesn't slow down. There's always a need for it to get faster and faster. All right. So if we take a look at where we started from, right? So this is already probably 10 years after we started. And so what you're going to see is the thing in the middle is called a BBS. And so back in the day, we didn't have these big fancy websites. And by back in the day, I mean like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. We're not talking 100 years ago. I mean, some of the stuff we talk about rocketry, we're talking about stuff from 70 years ago. This is not that long ago. This is 25 years ago, give or take. And so if you look at the BBS, right, it's all text. You don't see graphics. You don't see pretty pictures. You don't have the sound. But this was one of the very first ways that you could interact on the internet. Was with the BBSs. I can tell you that I'm going to age myself a little bit. I'm not that old, but when my wife and me, we were going out in college. I was going to college during this time back around the 2000s, and we didn't have cell phones. There's no cell phones. So what we did is we chatted on the internet. The same way that you all text message yourselves today. We did that through one of these BBS units. And that was really fantastic. It allowed us to stay in contact. I went to a college that was in Rochester, New York. She was in Buffalo, New York. So it's about an hour drive. So, you could do it relatively easy. You could go back and forth, but you wouldn't do it every day. And so this was a nice way of keeping contact with each other. So it's really the first time that we saw the internet being used for that method. So now what we had, so when they first started all this, we had what was called 300 Baud Modem. And so this is what started it all. So basically you picked up a telephone and you put it on that modem. The modem would take the zeros and ones and it would convert it to an audible noise and it would send it across a telephone wire. And we'll do some explanations later, but 300 baud was really slow, like ridiculously slow. You could only do text. There's no pictures. There's no nothing. It's text. And then we went from 300 baud modems, and we actually went from a 300 baud modem, and then we actually went to a 1200 baud modem, which was the same technology. They just improved it. And then we went to what we used for a long, long time. And this was a 56K modem. So this was 56,000. So we went from 300 to 1200 to 56,000. And we use these modems everywhere. I mean, I have some of these still in my basement. They're everywhere. So businesses used them. This was really the first time that you could connect a telephone line straight into a device, straight into a computer. And so these were really fantastic. And then the one problem that we had with that technology, other than speed, which, mind you, we didn't know it was slow. For us, this was new technology. This was fantastic. We've never been able to do this stuff before. So not being able to watch Harry Potter in 4K didn't matter to us. We had no idea what that speed even was. And so now one of the problems with those modems is that you were sharing a telephone line with your house. So a lot of times when we got to 56K bottoms, now you were starting to download pictures. Not real video. It's too slow for video, but you were starting to download pictures. But you also were starting to do online gaming. And so I can tell you how many times I would be sitting there doing an online game, and then all of a sudden the game would lock up. Nobody on the game would be moving. And you yelled out, you'd listen, and you would hear your mom or dad yell, "Oh, I'm sorry," because they picked up the phone. They wanted to call somebody. But in the back, they picked up the phone and they started hearing, they started hearing all the computer noises from the modem. Some of us, the real geeks like me, I guess, the real geeks, we actually had a second phone line put into the house. So we had a phone line for everybody else in the house, and we had a phone line for just the computer. And today that's actually still true in some places. If that's all you can still get. So now we will go from the 56K baud modems to today. So we really have, for most of us, we have two options. We have DSL and we have cable. So cable is just that. It's your cable TV. I know some people will use satellite TV. This isn't satellite TV. This is the cable that comes in the ground. And then DSL is still a phone line. And so DSL is very slow. Matter of fact, if you guys are having difficulty, if the stream is breaking up and I haven't seen it yet, then you are going to, that's because I'm on DSL. There is no cable internet to my house. And so that means I can only do things very slow. So with that, actually do me a favor, if you can, I see we've got a couple of folks that are online watching. Go ahead and give me a comment. Give me a thumbs up that you can hear this okay and that the video is coming in okay. I would just like to be able to know that until I go through the whole video and then find out at the end that it didn't work for you guys. Okay. So that is Dsl and Cable. Again, DSL you're looking at is a telephone line. So it's still the same telephone line. So if you have a regular telephone line to your house, you can get DSL. And for cable, you would have to have a cable line brought to your house. Now, depending on where you live, not everybody has a cable line brought to their house. I can tell you because I'm kind of a nerd techie guy, the internet's very slow for me, so I actually contacted our cable company. I said, hey, what would it take? Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Karen. What would it take to bring in that cable line to my house? Not because I wanted cable TV, but because I wanted cable internet. And thanks, Xavier. Thanks, Atharva. Thanks, Clyde. Thanks, Amos. And so it was really important. And so I called the cable company. They said, sure, we'd be happy to do it. It'll cost you $13,000 to draw a line from the street to the house. 13 grand. At that point, all of a sudden, I felt that cable wasn't that important. I was getting by with DSL, and I am waiting on satellite. We're going to talk about that next. So where are we now? Oops, I'm sorry, wrong screen. All right. So just a quick screen here. I wanted to show what the routers and switches look like. So you connect to your house usually with a little box, and then it'll connect to either the cable provider, Comcast, or AT&T if you're using DSL. All that data goes to what you're seeing here, which is the routers and switches. Now, I actually do have some of those routers and switches in my basement. I have a home lab that I do this work. I do this stuff for work. So I actually have some of this equipment in my basement. If this is something that you would like, then go ahead. Yeah, Noah, thanks. Yeah, the delay, there's a roughly 10, 15 second delay from the time you guys will type to the time I see it. And about a 15-second delay from when I'm saying something to the time you're going to hear it. So yeah, so there is a little bit of a delay. So I appreciate that though. So if you guys would like a more detailed lesson on actual data networking, let me know. I actually did a little lesson for our cybersecurity, Cyber Patriot team a couple of months ago. I think it went pretty well. If that's something you would like to see how this stuff works a little bit more, hands-on, just let me know in the comment section below. I can put something together for you. Okay. All right. So now we talked about DSL and we talked about cable. Now what we want to do is we want to talk about fiber. Fiber is king and queen. It is the way to go. And so if you look at this graph, let me pull it up for you here. If you look at this graph, it goes, mega, then giga is 1,000 times more than mega, and then tera is 1,000 times more than giga. So, so as they say, the graph is not to scale because that fiber is 2,000 times more than that cable. And so what this is showing is this isn't showing the speed that you get at home. This is showing how much total speed you can get across the wire. Thanks, Karen. Yep, I'll take a look at that. So if you look at 4G, most of your cell phones today are 4G. So that gives you 100 megabit per second. And a bit is 8 zeros and ones. So if you hear the zeros and ones for binary, a bit is 8 of those. I'm sorry, I take that back. A byte. A byte is 4. That's 8 of those. A bit is 1. And so 4G is 100 megabit. Now, when I go to, that's most of your cell phones. So when I go to DSL, which is what I'm using, we have 170 megabit. So my home speed is the total. Again, this isn't per person. This is the total bandwidth that you can get across. So if there was people sharing my phone line, you'd only be able to get 170 for all of us. So it's really important that everybody kind of has their own connection. Now, 5G, you're hearing a lot about things about 5G. We may at some point talk about 5G more. This is something that you may want to take a look at the internet for some YouTube videos if you want to learn more about 5G. Right now, unfortunately, 5G is a big sales pitch. There are very few places in their country that have true 5G. There are a lot of places in the country that Verizon and all the other cellular providers, AT&T, Sprint, they'd all like you to believe that you've got 5G in your neighborhood today. Unless you're living in a very specific apartment building in the middle of San Francisco, a few other places, you don't have true 5G. And it will be a very long time before we get 5G. But as we can see, 5G is a lot faster than 4G, and 5G is a lot faster than DSL. The amount of data that it can send is much, much bigger. And so if we had 5G that could reach my house, I would immediately turn off DSL and I would immediately just use cellular 5G. But unfortunately, 5G is not in a lot of places. It'll be years before we get it. In fact, I saw that they were planning on spending $150 billion, B with a B, a billion with a B, $1 billion to get to 5G. So it's a lot of money. It's going to take them a long time. And obviously they're going to start in places like cities, big cities, New York City, Los Angeles, places like that. Now, then we go up to cable. So this is your Comcast, your Roadrunner if you're up north, and a Time Warner cable if you're also up north. And so as you can see here, it's the pipe, the amount of data you can put through that cable is 50 gigabit. Again, a gigabit is 1,000 times more than a megabit. And so it can take an amazing amount more data than DSL can take. Now, you don't get all that speed. So everybody shares that cable. So if you live in a subdivision, everybody shares that cable. So, but it's got so much bandwidth that instead of getting roughly 30 megabit per second like I get at my house, you'll probably get 100 megabit per second at your house. So if you had cable, you're probably running 3 times or more faster than I'm running. Now, we're going to talk about fiber because that's the next thing. So fiber is 100 terabits. It is unbelievable how much data you can throw through a strand of fiber. And what they actually do is they actually lay down cords that include a lot of these fiber strands. So there is a great deal. I apologize for the dog barking behind. Hopefully he won't keep barking. I have a barker dog. And so the fiber, that's really where you want to be. Now the problem is that fiber is relatively new. It's very expensive to run. And really you can only get it in major cities. So if you're really highly densely populated. Over time, that will move out to the suburbs more. If you're lucky in the suburbs, you can get fiber today. For me, I can't even get cable, let alone fiber. But fiber is king. It's super fast. And, just on the down below, I've got, if we look back at the slide, so fiber can carry, a single strand of fiber can carry 2,000 times more than cable. It can carry 10,000 times more than what the 5G signal will be able to hold. And then we have my puny DSL. A fiber strand can carry but it was a little less than 600,000 times more than my puny telephone line DSL. So that shows you how much further we've come along in our technology. So now that's fiber. So now we're finally here. We're finally going to look at satellite. And we probably have about 10 minutes left of the lesson in case for those of you that are looking. Now with satellite, we have satellite today. And before we talk about those satellites, I want to do real quick discussion on latency. So the latency is actually what Noah said here, that there was a delay. So that's what this is. It's how much time does it take to get from point A to point B. Now, when you talk about the speed of light, you're talking crazy fast, right? But believe it or not, it's still time. I mean, the computers operate so fast, and if we're talking to another part of the world, we really are looking at, even the speed of light is a slowdown. And so if you were to go look at our again, going back to the speed of light, this is how many kilometers. For those of us on the United States, we're used to miles, not kilometers. So 10 kilometers is 6.2 miles. So you can just think of it. If you want to get rough, you can say 60%. So you're looking at 300,000 kilometers every second. So that sounds just crazy fast, right? But it still takes time. It takes 1.29 seconds to get to the moon. It would take 8 light minutes to get to the sun. So if the sun exploded right now, and I mentioned this, I think, in my last in class lesson, if the sun were just a poof, explodes, you wouldn't know about it for 8 minutes, because it would take 8 minutes from the time that the sun exploded to the time that the light would hit you. You would see. Mars is 12.7 minutes, and so if you have to talk to anybody on Mars in the future, you're going to say something. You're going to look at your watch. It's 13 minutes from the time you said it. They're going to get it. They're going to respond, and then it's going to be 13 minutes from the time they responded to the time you get it. So it's going to be about 30 minutes every time you want to say something to somebody on Mars. So, and right now we have no way around that. There's no Star Trek thing where we can talk across the galaxy immediately. If you can figure out how to make that work, you are going to be a very rich and very important person in this world. And then our nearest star, other than the sun, is 4.3 light years away. So that's super, super far. And then the other side of the Milky Way galaxy, 52,000 light years away. So the other thing that's important here too, I want to point out, this is important, is that light travels about 35. I've seen different things depending on the type of glass, between 30 to 40% slower going through an optical fiber than if it was going through space. So the glass itself actually has a little bit of resistance, and so the better the quality of glass, the faster the light can travel through it. But you're still looking at between 30 to 40% slower going through glass than going through space. So if anybody tells you that light travels the same everywhere, it's not true. It goes slower through water. It goes slower through glass. And this is important. So now, our current satellites. What we have today is we have basically 2 satellite companies, and they are flying really high. We're going to show on our slide later. But they're flying roughly 22,000 miles in space. And so that takes a long time. It takes roughly 800 milliseconds to transmit something from the Earth to the satellite and have it come back down. It's about 300 milliseconds, 300, 400 milliseconds each way, about 800 milliseconds per. The problem with that is if you're somebody that is doing video conferencing, you're playing, especially if you're somebody playing games, 800 milliseconds is an eternity when you're playing a game. You would just have stutter all over the place. You wouldn't be able to use it. Also, the satellites are relatively slow, and there's only really one of them out there for each company. So that's important. Now, if we look at, let me go back over the slideshow. So these are the 2 companies today that offer satellite internet, Viasat and Usenet. I think Usenet is arguably the more popular one. And again, 22,000 miles above the Earth. Just keep that number in your head, 22,000 miles. And about 700 milliseconds of latency. So if you're sending email, if you're watching YouTube videos, that's fine. You can deal with that latency. It'll just buffer and it'll play fine. Not good for games, not good for video conferencing, things of that nature. And then the satellite itself gets 260 gigabit per second. But that's the whole satellite. So if there are hundreds of thousands of people that are sharing that satellite, you're all sharing that 260 gigabit per second. So you end up not getting a lot of bandwidth, depending on how many people are using it. We're going to talk about that next here. So actually, let me throw that. All right. So now let's talk about the next generation. So next generation is going to be Starlink and Cooper. So Starlink is actually done by Elon Musk. It's part of Tesla, SpaceX. At some point, they think that they're probably going to split off Starlink from SpaceX, and they are going to put up tens of thousands of satellites, tens of thousands. They've already started. They are putting up roughly 1 to 2 launches a month of 60 satellites. They couldn't do this if they didn't have that reusable rocket. It would cost too much money to throw up 60 satellites and destroy the rocket. But because they can reuse the rocket and relatively easily refuel it, reset it, get it back up into space, just pay for basically the fuel and for the refurbishment of the rocket, they can get these satellites up into space pretty easy. And they're launching, like I said, about 60 to 120 of these little satellites every month. And so while it sounds like thousands and thousands is a really big number to get to, they're launching, give or take 60 to 120 of them a month, and they think they're going to actually get faster than that pretty soon. Now that's Starlink. Now Cooper. So Cooper is actually, I believe, by Amazon. I put them on here because they're probably going to be the biggest competitor to Starlink, but they're behind. Starlink's already, I think they've got 6 launches now. They've got another one, I think, planned for next week. So Starlink is putting those satellites up into space, and Cooper is still designing and testing. And I think they did have a test flight. But again, they're not using reusable rockets. I don't believe. I think that they're using ULA rockets, which means it's much more expensive to get their satellites into space. Now, I can't imagine that Amazon's not going to go to Elon Musk and SpaceX at some point and say, all right, how much money to put my satellites in your rocket? I can't imagine it. Now, Jeff Bezos is also working on his own rockets. And that's another mission. That's another lesson for another day. But he's not up into space yet. So if he wants to get his satellites in space, he's going to need something cheap and now, which would be the SpaceX. All right. So now, one of the things you're going to see is that we now have a mesh. So as opposed to having 1 or 2 big satellites that are way, way high up in space that can see a large area of Earth, we have tens of thousands of these small satellites, and they form a mesh. And what's important about this is I can get internet now just about anywhere. If I'm on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, I can get fast internet. If I am in the middle of Africa doing some testing, or if I'm in a rural village in Africa, I'm not, they can get fast internet now. For give or take a $200 receiver, they can get fast internet in places where there is no internet today. So this is really going to help to bring everybody together in the world. Now this goes back to latency again. If we look at latency, on the ground, right? This is looking at fiber. You can see 250 millisecond if you were in Alaska and you wanted to talk to Australia. I think it's roughly 80 milliseconds to go from New York City to UK. And if you're in South America going up to Europe, you're looking at about 75 milliseconds. Now, again, we talked about the height of the satellites being really important. So Usenet Viasat, they're at 22,000 miles, latency of about 400, 800 milliseconds, and 260 gigabit per second shared between 1 or 2 satellites. Now, Starlink is going to be only 300 to 500 miles. So you're talking significantly lower than the geostationary satellites. Each satellite is only going to get, I say only, is only going to get about 20 gigabit per second, but that's per satellite. And so there's going to be roughly 40, right now there's about 42,000 of them that they're planning. And so if you look at 42,000 times 20 gigabit per second, that gives you 840 gigabit per second total. That's 3,000 times more data than the current internet satellite. And it's 100 times faster, 100 times lower latency than the current satellite. And so when somebody says, well, hey, listen, we've already got satellite today. We don't need, what's going to be so much bigger about Starlink? Why do they need to put up all these satellites? This is why. These satellites are small, not relatively. They're relatively small satellites. They're going by much faster. They only see a smaller piece of the Earth because they're down much, much lower to the Earth. We'll talk about that in a second. They're only going to see a smaller number of people. But there's a lot of them. So again, you're looking at 3,000 times more data capacity than current satellite and a much faster speeds. Now, latency of about 3 milliseconds. You don't notice it. I mean, it's basically not there. The amount of time, we talked about 800 milliseconds to get up and down to the current satellites, and then you're looking at 3 seconds to get to these ones that are closer to the Earth. It's like it doesn't exist. So now you can play video games. You can do everything you want with that satellite technology. You can't do that today. All right, so this is what we're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. So this is what the current satellites look like. They look like little pizza boxes, a little bigger than a pizza box, and then they have a solar panel that unfolds itself after it goes. Let's see here. And one thing, I want to keep it up actually. I actually did some calculations just to show you the difference. So if I wanted to transfer a DVD, so a DVD is roughly 4.7 gigabit in size. So if you take a look at that, when I had that 300 baud modem, it would take more than 4 years to transfer one DVD. So you better hope that your parents didn't pick up the phone in 4 years. In 1982, that's really long. I mean, that's a big time distance, right? 68 to 82. We went up to 1,200, and now you could transfer that DVD in a little bit more than a year. I think it was like 1.2 years. Come 1998, again, we're talking pretty significant amount of time, 16 years. That's when we went up to the 56K baud modems. That was the big thing for everybody. Now you could transfer that DVD. Now we didn't have DVDs back in that time, but now you could transfer a DVD in 7 hours and 15 minutes. Then we went to 10 megabit per second. That would transfer a DVD in an hour and 7 minutes. If you looked at what I typically get at my house, I typically get about 25 megabit per second. So I can transfer a DVD in about 24 minutes. If you had 100 megabit per second cable internet, you could transfer a DVD in 6 minutes. And with fiber or Starlink, that's going to be roughly a gigabit per second. You can transfer an entire DVD, an entire movie, and most movies aren't even 4.7. You can transfer an entire disc DVD in 40 seconds. And so if you look at from when we started at 300 baud modems to fiber, we are 17,857 times faster than we were back with baud modems. This little chart over here to the right, the download and upload speeds. Again, if you look at the DSL, again, that's what I have. You're looking at 24, 25 coming down. It's much slower going up. That's why I'm so worried about these live streams, because I'm worried that I don't have a fast enough connection to you guys. But it seems like it's working. If you had cable, a cable provider, most of you are getting about 100 megabits per second down, 10 up. Don't worry about the fixed wireless. That's something different. And then for satellite, this is for Usenet. You are looking at 15 megabit per second down, 3 up. So it's actually slower than my DSL, even though you're satellite. And also you have that huge latency. So the only people that use satellite today are people that live in the very rural areas where there just isn't any internet connectivity other than satellite. Satellite's also more expensive. It's about 20 to 40% more expensive depending on what you're doing with it. So Starlink will actually be a little bit cheaper, and it's going to be crazy fast, both the amount of bandwidth you can do as well as how fast it's actually getting up and down. Now, I wanted to show you real quick. I got 2 quick videos. Both of them are just a couple seconds long. So let me see. I'm hoping this works okay on the internet. And if we get sound, we'll just kind of go with it. So remember I told you we get 60 of these satellites. What they do is they put them into a clump and they launch them all at once and then they separate. They have small little Krypton engines and they all separate. And so this is actually from the Earth. You could actually see the trail of those satellites as they were starting to spread apart. And we're going to talk about one of the problems with that. This is actually the Krypton Thruster. They have a small little thruster that's on board. And let's see here. Now, if we go next, the SpaceX, when they actually deploy these, they release them at about 440 kilometers. And that little Krypton engine actually will raise them up to about, I think it was like 550 to 575 kilometers. Let's see, I think it'll tell us here, 550. And that's about 375 miles. So as opposed to 22,000 miles. And so they'll actually raise themselves up. Those little Krypton engines also, if the satellite thinks it's going to bump into something else up in space, the Krypton engines can actually move the satellites out of the way. As well as when the satellite is no longer in use, is useful, they will actually, basically turn the satellite upside down, and then they'll use that Krypton engine to actually slow it down, and then get slower, and then it'll deorbit. It'll actually come into the atmosphere and it'll burn up into the atmosphere. So that is that. Now here's the one. This is, I think, our last slide. So the one problem that we're expecting with all these satellites, and again, we're looking at 42,000 of these satellites just for SpaceX alone, and there's other companies that are looking to do this. So you literally could go, hundreds of thousands of satellites, tens of thousands of satellites, hundreds of thousands of satellites. You get all these companies up there, and if you look at today, there's only been about 9,000 satellites that have been launched from all the way back in the beginning of the space race for us and to now. There's only been 9,000 satellites. And so we're going to be adding tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of these satellites. And so one of the problems that we're going to have is these satellites are actually going to be, because they're so low to the Earth, they're relatively visible. And so you're actually going to, unless they're going to look at coding them to try to make them less visible, less reflective. But right now, they're reflective. And if you looked up in the sky and you were taking pictures and doing astronomy, and these things would be crossing in front of you. In some astronomy, you take pictures, you take them for days, right? You take multiple images for days, and you would see all these dots. And so if you look at the PowerPoint, you would see, your picture, you would have all these little dots going across your picture. Now, this is an issue that's been brought up to Elon Musk, SpaceX, as well as Bezos and everybody else at Amazon, and they think they have solutions for it. So they've told everybody not to freak out. They'll make this work. All right. So with that, before we do we have a little quick hands-on lesson, and so for those of you that are still here, it'll be a little bit of a delay between the time I can see your question and I respond. But I'll hang out just for a couple of minutes. What questions do you guys have? All right, you guys should be seeing questions now. So I just have to wait. Now, this is latency. This is how much time it's taking between and buffering. It's not just latency. But how much time it's taking for me to say something and for you to see it, for you to respond, it's probably about 20 to 30 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, I'll be keeping an eye out for any questions that you have. But also I'm going to start the hands-on lesson so we just don't sit here in silence for, 5-10 minutes. So here's what I would like you to do on your hands-on lesson. Now, your hands-on lesson is going to be to see what is your speed, what is your type of internet connection. Are you using DSL, cable, satellite? Most of you probably aren't satellite. Will you even know what you're using? And if you don't know, you're about to find out because we can tell based on the results you're going to get. So what I'd like you to do, go ahead and open up a new browser window. So don't change this browser window, otherwise you're going to turn me off. You won't hear me anymore. Go ahead and open up a new browser window or a new tab and go to speedtest.net. And then once you're there, just click the go. And it will run a speed test. It usually takes about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, give or take. And this is actually the results what I had. And so I had a 31 millisecond. So that's pretty fast. I was able to get to a server that was in Hartwell, Georgia, in 31 milliseconds. I was able to get 31 megabit per second download. So that's right. That's how right there. You can see that you're on DSL. I can't get any faster than on DSL. And then the upload speeds here, it said that I would get about 2 megabit per seconds up. I can tell you that I don't get 2 megabit per seconds up. I do get about 25 megabit per second down. So the 31, that's pretty close. But the 2 is not close. I get about 0.8 to 1 megabit per second upload speeds. So I'd be interested. Go ahead and test this out. If we're still on here, feel free to go ahead and post either in the chat window or go ahead and post in the comment section down below if you would like. What did you get? I'd be interested to know. And then if you got, like I said, if you're around 30, you're probably using DSL. And if you're around 100, you're probably using cable. If you're around 1,000, I'm very envious. It means that you're probably not one of my cadets here in Greenville, South Carolina. You're probably watching this from a city or some place that has fiber. There is places inside of Greenville that also have fiber. So you are very lucky, and I'm envious. I want your house. I want your data connection. So feel free, go ahead and let us know what you got. All right, so we did get one question. I got a question from Noah Smith. Would they do maintenance or let the satellites fail? So they're going to let the satellites fail. So what they actually will do is there's going to be 2 answers to that question. So one, if they send the satellite up and let's see, so download your 37. Well, you know what? You're a little bit fast for DSL, but that's not. But so you're probably our cable. It's just a little bit slower on the cable, but you're faster than what DSL would get you, Noah. Especially at upload speed. That man, I miss having that 7 megabit per second upload speed. So what they would do is if they go up and the satellite just doesn't work at all, then what they're going to do is they're going to basically take that Krypton engine and they're going to aim the thing so that it comes out of the earth and it goes and it smacks into the water, into the middle of the ocean. So that's what they'll do. Now, if the Krypton engine, this was actually interesting. I thought this was really fascinating. So somebody would say, why don't they actually send the satellites and put them at that 375 miles, 550 kilometers height day one? Why are they putting them lower in the Earth's atmosphere and then using that engine to go up? Isn't that really inefficient to do that with all those little engines? And here's the reason why they're doing it. And this is really, really smart. So those of you that want to be engineers, this is the stuff you think about. This is great. So by putting it lower, let's say it was higher, let's say they put it up higher, and that engine didn't work. Well, now this thing is floating where all these other satellites are just going in and out of each other. And something's going to smack. They're going to hit, right? Eventually, someday. Space is really big, but eventually something's going to hit. And now you're going to have this huge debris field. There was a movie a couple years ago called Gravity. Sandra Bullock, go watch it if you haven't seen it. Great. About somebody shooting a missile at a satellite as a test, and the debris just scattered in space, and it was at the same altitude as the International Space Station, and it just wiped out the International Space Station. So that's what would happen. These two satellites, even though they're relatively small, they would smack each other at really incredibly fast speeds, and they would just disintegrate. And then you would get this debris field. And so now what they did is by launching it at the lower height, if that engine doesn't work for whatever reason, then it will actually, within days, weeks, a month maybe, it'll slowly fall back to Earth on its own. So that's their fail-safe. If this thing goes up and it doesn't work, because they're sending tens of thousands of them, some of them aren't going to work. It's no matter how careful they are, it's just it's the way it works. Things break. So these things are good. It's going to fall back to Earth. And then that'll be how they do it. So either they'll use they'll either use the thrusters to say, you know what, we don't need the satellites up there. They got newer, faster satellites, 10 years from now, and so they're going to push the older, slower satellites out of space, or the satellite will fall out of itself. So that's how they're going to handle the maintenance. Let's see, Clyde, I see you're at 18. That's fast. That's a fast latency, 18 milliseconds. That's great. Download 227. Man, Clyde, are you in fiber? That's really fast. 227. That's super fast. I'm jealous, Clyde. I'm going to come hang out with you. Let's see. Iris, let's see. You said 28 milliseconds. Download 80. Yep. So you're definitely on cable. You're right there. Let's see. Fernio, if I mispronounced anybody's names, I apologize. You're saying 70 and 11, so you're definitely cable. A lot of cable people. Xavier, let's see. You're at 41 and 15. The 41's a little slow for cable, but your upload speed's really fast. Now, the other thing that might be affecting it too is if you have people in the house that are watching videos, you're watching a video. So if people are watching TV over the cable, that's also going to use the bandwidth. So if you tested it again at 3 a.m. when nobody was doing anything, chances are that speed would actually go up. Let's see here. We got Hawk. I'm assuming that's what that is. You've got 72, so you're definitely cable. And Christian Diego, you're running at 10 and down and 1 up. So you are probably DSL, or you might even. I mean, that's actually into the satellite, using that satellite speeds. So Christian, I'm just curious. Are you running on satellite? And Burke, hey Burke, how are you doing? Let's see, you're running 19 up and 19 down and 2 up, and so great. Yeah, Burke, it looks like you're with me. Looks like you're probably DSL. That or everybody in your house is uploading and downloading things right now. But chances are, especially because of that upload speed, you're probably like me on DSL. Let's see. I was about to say my whole family is streaming right now, so that's what happens. Now that actually is part of the problem now. That's actually why we're going to be wrapping up here now in a second. But that is actually what we are seeing. Because folks are at home, both the parents are at home, if assuming that they can work from home. Not everybody can work from home, obviously. It's hard to make a physical device, if you're in your office at home. It's hard to, work in a grocery store, from your house. But the office people, or people that can work from home, they're taking a lot of bandwidth that you didn't normally have. And then our cadets, other students, both my daughters are home. My one daughter's in college. Clemson, she's now home. And my other daughter, she's in 10th grade and she's home. So they're watching. My dog's in the background, as you can probably hear them. They're home, so maybe we'll put on the puppy bowl for them. And Clyde, that's great that you're on fiber. I hope someday that I can be on fiber as well. I'm expecting I'm never going to be on fiber. My expectation is that in about 2 years, another year and a half, 2 years, when Starlink goes live, I will be one of the very first people. I'm going to leave DSL on for a little bit just in case Starlink goes up and down and it's not reliable. But I can tell you I'll be moving off. So I think you're going to find a lot of companies like AT&T and Comcast, they're not going to be drawing a bunch of new cable lines out the houses because they know within a couple of years they're going to be way slow compared to what people will be able to get in satellite. But if you can get fiber, that's still the way to go. Tharva, 17 millisecond ping, that's great. All right, so let's see here. Let me go back over here real quick. So that was our lesson for today. A little longer than I thought. We actually went about an hour. That's quite a bit. I thought that we would probably crush this through in about half an hour. So I appreciate everybody sticking with us for a whole hour. Let's see here. So what we're doing. So next week we're not going to let this whole virus thing keep us down. We're going to move ahead on the model rockets. So we are, if you are in the Greenville Composite Squadron, again, try to come over and pick up, or have your parents or have a friend or pick up one of your model rocket kits. I have enough for everybody. We had some model rockets that were still in the back that added to the 48 that I bought this last year. So we should have enough for everybody. If you're a senior member and you want to do this, let me know. Come on by. As long as we have enough, I'll be happy to give you one. Like I said, I think we've got 58 rockets right now. So that should be enough for everybody. So what we're going to do next week is we're going to go over the details of the rocketry, and it'll probably be a little bit longer for the hands-on. The actual lesson itself will be a little bit short, and then the hands-on will be long. It'll be the opposite of this time, where the lesson was long and the hands-on was short. Because I am going to build a rocket here, right here on the desk. So I have to figure out how to do the camera and stuff like that to make this all work. If you are not a member of the Greenville Composite Squadron, if you're in Greenville, let us know. We have open houses. We'd love to see you. You can come check us out. But if you're not in Greenville and you would still like to take part in this, go ahead and hit up one of your favorite online retailer, and you can order a level 1 rocket if you're younger, or if you're a little bit older, or if you have really good hand building skills. Go ahead and order yourself a level 2. We're going to be doing all the rockets that we're going to be building here in Greenville. They're all level 1 rockets. So what we're going to do here next week will be level 1. There's only a little bit of complexity differences between level 1 and level 2. So feel free. Now, if you are one of my younger cadets and you don't have, it's hard for you to cut in a straight line. Let me know when you see me on Wednesday, or let your parents know to tell me on Wednesday. A third of the rockets we have, actually more than that, about half of the rockets that we have pre-made fins. So you don't have to cut out the fins and glue the fins to the body. They're already pre-made. So if you're nervous about that, you want to make it super as easy as you can for your first rocket, that's great. We've got stuff for you. If you want something a little bit harder, go ahead and let me know. I'll make sure that you get the ones where you have to glue the fins on. Or if you're not in Greenville, go ahead and order the rocket. You can do it with us anyways. All right, I think that is going to be it for tonight. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining. Again, we had an hour. We actually do in the squadrons. We do shoot for those of you that are not part of the Greenville Composite Squadron. We do shoot for 1 hour AE lessons. So while this was a little longer than I expected tonight, it's actually right in line with what we would do in a real AE lesson. So again, if you're interested, right now we're not having, because of the virus, we're not having meetings. But be on the lookout if you're interested in joining Civil Air Patrol, regardless if you're in Greenville or if you're another part of the state. Go ahead and take a look at the website. Look up Civil Air Patrol, and then you can find a local squadron or contact us here in Greenville if you're by us. We would love to see you at one of our open houses. And with that, I think it's it. Let's see. So Xavier, we are going to do the rockets on 7. You should have an email, 7 p.m. Till 8 p.m. on Wednesday. So try to have you or your parents or somebody pick them up as close to 7 p.m. as you can. Assuming it's not raining, I'm going to have a little table outside of the squadron. This way nobody has to open the door, and everybody's touching the door. So my wife and I will try to have a little table outside. We have taken all the supplies. We've put them all in little baggies. I should have left one on the table so I could show you. They're actually in my closet right now. But you can come in, you can just grab a bag. And we'll have some sanitation wipes there as well. And I think that's it. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody. And again, these lessons, even though they're live, they're also being recorded. So if you have other cadets, or if you have anybody else, a friend that you think might be interested, a senior member, somebody that might be interested in space and satellite, internet at some point, feel free to let them know. Go ahead and I have to do the whole YouTube thing, right? Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and hit the like button if you like this this lesson. And Leave a comment down below if you'd like additional information. If there's any information you thought was wrong, I'm not a rocket scientist, so feel free to go ahead and put that your question down below. And we're not a big YouTube channel. There's maybe 80, 100 people that are watching these videos right now. So I probably will respond to each one of you. So go ahead and feel free to ask any questions you have. All right. With that, thank you, everybody. I greatly appreciate it. Hope you all have a great day, and we will see you very shortly. All right. Thanks all. Bye.